one of the most underrated games of week one is taking place in San Antonio. Now, everybody's going to be talking about Georgia and Oregon. They're going to be talking about Notre Dame and Ohio State. They're probably going to be talking about Cincinnati and Arkansas before this one. But Houston and San Antonio are the only two teams that play each other in week one that had 12 wins each in 2021. Now, this is a matchup that is really exciting for both programs. These are two programs that are on the rise. They're very hot commodities in their respective conferences. And when you look at these two teams, we have the potential to see an absolute barn burner when it's all said and done. When you look at, we're looking at by the numbers first, then we're going to dive into the X factors of the game, matchups to watch, and keys of the game will also follow that. There's a lot to talk about, there's a lot to dissect, a lot to dive into. And first, we take a look at the two teams themselves. First is going to be Houston at 12-2 last year. They played for an AC championship, came up a little bit short against Cincinnati. And then you look at UTSA, who won Conference USA with the same record at 12-2. This is the third meeting between these two teams. It's tied 1-1. UTSA won the last meeting. These two programs are in drastically different places than the last time that they played. And they're both in really good places too. So this is going to be an exciting game. Again, if you're looking for an underrated game, UTSA and Houston is the game to watch. Go to X factors for each side. First, we start with the Houston Cougars. Tajon Henry is going to take a huge step forward because Alton McCaskill is doubtful for the year. I don't think we're going to see the sophomore running back for Houston. That's a huge blow. And Tajon Henry is not Alton McCaskill. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. And when you look at what they have behind him, there's not a ton of proven depth. So Tajon Henry is going to be that more versatile scat back out of the backfield. He's going to be able to run between the tackles, but they want to get him out in space. They want to throw him the football, and that's something to keep an eye on because it might affect what Houston wants to do during the game. And if they take certain things away, if UTSA takes certain things away, he could play a big role. Nelson Caesar is the other one on the other side of the ball. I think at the bandit position, they kind of switched things up. It was interesting that they put not two defensive ends. They have the bandit, and Nelson Caesar is a guy that we've been hearing about all offseason, someone that had a little bit of production, 22 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. I think that he is ready to take a step forward, especially after hearing what everybody has to say about him, the excitement surrounding his game. This is someone that you really need to pay attention to, someone that Houston is really lucky to have, an explosive player, and someone that could have a major impact in this game. When you go to UTSA, Frank Harris has to be the biggest X factor on that team. The quarterback is going to determine how high they go. Last year was a conference championship. This year, they're looking to repeat, maybe a perfect season. It's going to be tough, especially because they play Houston and they play Texas. That is going to be a hard offseason or odd not conference to get past. So undefeated, maybe not. However, Frank Harris is going to be the big X factor in that. Over 3,100 yards last year with 27 touchdowns. He also rushed for 566 yards and 6 more scores. He is a dynamic player, someone that Houston definitely has circled when in the game plan, and someone that is going to be a big factor in determining how good UTSA's offense is going to be. When you flip to the other side of the ball, Rashad Wisdom is the do-it-all safety for this defense. Led the team in tackles last year, and like I said, does a little bit of everything. He's not afraid to stick his nose in the trenches. He also can drop back, and especially against Houston's offense, this is an explosive offense, and he's going to play a big role in determining how explosive that offense will be. Matchups to watch, there's a ton of matchups in this game that I really, really like. There's a couple, though, that stand out. Houston's corners, which is Alex Hogan and Art Green, are two inexperienced, they have some experience, but relatively inexperienced players with good potential. They're facing a trio of wide receivers from UTSA in Zachary Franklin, Joshua Cephas, and Decorian Clark, who at one point was a Houston commit. That is a trio that is going to give them some potential difficulty. You look at Hogan, he's 5'11". Green is 6'2". Zachary Franklin comes in at 6'1". Cephas and Clark are 6'3". That trio combined for over 2,600 yards and 25 touchdowns in 2021. This is a very proven and talented group. And the Houston corners, while they have inexperience or not a lot of experience, they're going to be a group that I think could step up and make this defense even better. The safeties have a ton of experience. The corners do not. However, the talent that we saw from them last year, we saw them in little bits and pieces. They have the talent to compete. Now, how they do against this trio is going to determine a lot in this game. This is a trio that is very talented. They're capable of making life very miserable for the guys that they face. And Alex Hogan and Art Green really have their hands full. How they respond to that test goes a long way in determining how well this defense is going to be able to slow down the UTSA offense. Now, UTSA has some things they need to address as well, specifically how their tackles handle Houston's defensive ends. When we're talking defensive ends, we talked about Nelson Caesar. He's the bandit on the other side, so maybe not always going to be a rusher, but someone they'll definitely have to pay attention to. The two guys that they need to worry about, though, that is Demetrius Allen and Mekhi Hart, Derek Parrish and DeAnthony Jones. Surprisingly, Parrish was not listed as a starter. He was listed behind DeAnthony Jones. However, we know that they're going to be able to play. You saw what Derek Parrish did last year. Absolute monster for this defense. DeAnthony Jones is getting his chance to be a starter. He's extremely explosive, maybe the best first step in all of college football. That's explosion that you need to pay attention to. Now, UTSA's offensive tackles have 23 games starts, and that's something that you can really hang your hat on. That's something you can work with. When you look at who they're facing, Parrish and Jones combined for 20 and a half tackles for loss and 11 sacks last year. That's an experienced group. That's a talented group. And that's one that knows exactly what they're doing. And if Frank Harris can't find room to run, then UTSA's offense is going to be in trouble. And going back to the first matchup to watch, if Parrish and Jones are having their way with that UTSA offensive line, Alex Hogan and Art Green aren't going to have to cover for very long. Specifically diving into the keys to the game, Houston, there are three things that I think really are going to help them a lot. First is unleashing Sack Avenue. This is a group that is super talented. We talked about the ends. You talked about Nelson Caesar. You talked about Derek Parrish. We talked about DeAnthony Jones. However, Chidozie Nwankwo is extremely powerful. You've got a guy that is at nose tackle that's going to be a problem. And you look at what they have elsewhere on the inside, this is a deep group. This is a group that's super talented, one that is going to be a problem for this experienced UTSA offensive line, but one maybe probably the best group that UTSA might see all year. When you look at what Houston can do, they finished tied for 6th in sacks and tied for 12th in tackles for loss. This is a front four that is going to present challenges. They are extremely explosive. They're extremely disruptive. And UTSA knows that. If Houston gets their way and unleashes that power, then this is going to be a blowout in favor of the Cougs. Next, you look at still show the run. Obviously, we talked about Tajon Henry. He's not the running back that Alton McCaskill was or is. And that's going to be a huge blow. However, you still need to run the ball. You still need to at least show some balance. And Clayton Tune can run too. The other thing is that if Henry can't do it, then Brandon Campbell could be extremely helpful. Now, he is a little bit bigger back than Henry, and that's something that could be a different aspect to Houston's rushing attack that could be really helpful. Clayton Tune in the passing attack could get things done, but you really have to establish the run in order to have that balanced offense. And without McCaskill, you might have to do that by committee. Last one is going to be, what do the non-Tank Dell contributors do? Because we know what Tank Dell can do. He led the team in catches, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. With over 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns, but 90 catches, the next closest guy had under 40 catches, just over 300 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So someone has to step up in order to make this a more balanced passing attack. You can't just throw the ball to Tank Dell every single play. Luckily for Houston, there are options. Joseph Manjack comes in from USC. Samuel Brown comes from West Virginia. Matthew Golden is a 4-star freshman that I think is going to be a future stud for this team. And Christian Trahan is back at tight end. So there are options. There's talent for Clayton Tune to find downfield. It just comes down to one of them has to step up because Tank Dell, again, can't do everything by himself. And someone else needs to step up. And if they do that, it makes this offense even more difficult to stop. Flipping over to UTSA, keep Frank Harris comfy early because this is a quarterback that is extremely talented, extremely experienced, and he's behind an offensive line that has talent and experience as well. That's a good combination. However, Houston's rush attack, flipping over to UTSA, keeping Frank Harris comfy is going to be a huge key. Now, this is an experienced and talented offensive line that has 4 or 5 starters returning. They also were 26th in the country last year in sacks allowed. Pair that with an extremely talented quarterback in Frank Harris, who also has a ton of experience and is a mobile quarterback. That's a good combination. However, Houston's rushing quarterback is really good. Their pass rush is one of the best in college football, as we saw before. So if you're able to keep them at bay, then you're in good hands. You're in luck. However, if they are having their way with your offensive line, it doesn't matter what Frank Harris does. He can only run for so long before they get to him. So keeping Frank Harris comfy is a big key in gaining some momentum, getting some traction on offense. And if he does that, then UTSA is going to be good hands. Second is Memphis Part 2. And what I mean by that is nobody expected UTSA to go into Memphis and beat the Tigers on the road. An experienced group and a talented group did that. Now they get to play an even better team in Houston at home. Can they build off that momentum? Because if they're able to use that experience and know what it takes to beat a team that is considered better than them, then they have a chance. I think Houston is on another level than Memphis. I think that's an even bigger step to take. But if they play with the confidence and they use that momentum that they got from last year, then this is a whole different ballgame. Finally, the front seven for UTSA must step up in a big way. You look at what they're capable of doing and what they're facing. You look at Houston's offensive line, that is probably the biggest weakness of this team from last year. It's super talented, but there were things that needed to be fixed. 111th in sacks allowed for Houston, 125th in tackles for loss allowed. So it wasn't like this offensive line was dominating. Now, I think that they're going to take a step forward. So that means there's a lot of pressure on the front seven for UTSA to be a dominant force, to make an impact. And that's really going to make life easy for the guys behind them, because if they're getting to Clayton Tune, if they're stopping the rushing attack, the secondary and the linebackers are going to have a little bit more time to get some air, to take some deep breaths. And even the linebackers, when they are involved, if you're slowing down that passing attack, then Houston doesn't have a ton to go on, because the rushing attack has already taken a hit with Ultimate Casco out. And if you're making Clayton Tune's life miserable, then you have put yourself in a great position to win the game. Do I think UTSA can win the game? Yes. Do I think it's likely? No. That's why we play the game, though. I think that this is a talented and experienced UTSA Roadrunners team. I think they're facing an even bigger challenge in Houston, a Houston team that has NY6 aspirations, AAC champion aspirations. Maybe if some miracle happens, they get into the college football playoff. Pretty unlikely. However, my point is, this is a team that is extremely dangerous no matter really where you look at it. Clayton Tune is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Tank Dell is one of the best wide receivers in college football. Matthew Golden is going to be in that conversation as well. Tajon Henry is explosive. This offense has a ton of weapons. On defense, the front seven is super talented, is super explosive. Good luck blocking that. UTSA has their hands full. However, if they can put these things together, they have a chance. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I think Houston probably wins this game, and pretty comfortably, at maybe 17, 14, 17 points, which in this kind of game is a comfortable win. And I think that that's going to be a big key. Is if UTSA is playing with a ton of confidence and they're limiting their mistakes, they have a chance. Otherwise, this is just a really good Houston team that is maybe destined for greatness. Still, week one provides a lot of great games. The game in San Antonio should be on your list. It's just as good in terms of the potential talent between the two teams, in terms of a potential good game. And if you're not paying attention to it and you want to expand your college football watching for week one, I highly recommend this game in San Antonio.